All right, everybody in? So how is everybody? Welcome to Wisdom Soup, you guys. So let me go ahead and pin me so you can see where I am over here. I know I'm hiding in the group. And there. Okay, welcome. So you guys, hi, it's great. Thanks so much for joining us. I know this is an unusual time for us, but we are trying to make it work. We are lucky enough with Zoom that we're able to bring in speakers from all over the world right now, which is super fun. And we've got somebody super exciting tonight to talk with us. So I see lots of familiar faces and some new faces as well. So those of you that are new to Wisdom Soup, we are a community that's been meeting together for, gosh, over 5 years now. We started out in person here in Bellevue, and the whole idea was just to find your peeps. And I called it Wisdom Soup because the idea was that you get to make your own soup, right? That everybody creates their own wisdom. And so through this community, we are just open and we're exposed to new ideas. And the idea is to take what works for you, what resonates as true, and leave the rest. So it's a place to explore consciousness and our evolution and our well-being in a bunch of different ways. And I choose speakers based on what is exciting to me. So hopefully you feel the same way that I do. And I find it to be just an amazing way to connect, like I said, with like-minded people and explore fun and exciting things. So, okay, so our speaker for tonight, let me go ahead and let you see him just a moment here. Here we are. Okay, so I would love to introduce to you guys Davyd Farrel, who has just let me know that from where he is, he's having horrible thunderstorms and his internet may be unstable. So everybody, fingers crossed that we are able to stick together tonight. So what drew me to Davyd was I heard him speaking about his experience with plant medicine, but in a very different way, with his awareness of plants as star beings. As a matter of fact, plant star beings are his guides. So he comes from a very, very different perspective, one that I found was really enlightening and super interesting. And I was really interested in having him talk to us about how he perceives the role of plants in our ascendance and how plants are here to help us with our ascension. So he is a plant shaman and a quantum plant alchemist, and he comes from an Irish Cornish background. So his Celtic roots form a strong part of his healing and shamanic practices. So he's trained as a plant spirit healer, crystal healer, geomancer, and a U Mysteries initiate. He's also been initiated into a long lineage of Kichwa. You're going to have to pronounce that for me.
That's correct. It's Kichwa. Yeah, it's from the Ecuadorian part of South America.
Thank you. Okay. And spent 3 years in India and Italy studying Tibetan Buddhism deeply in the semi-monastic centers. So Davyd has been around the block exploring things in a very grounded and shamanic way. So I'm very excited to have him share his perspective and his knowledge with us. So thank you so much for joining us, Davyd.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for that lovely intro, and hello to everybody. I'm super privileged and honored to be invited to speak with you all this evening and talk about something that I really love, which is plants and plant medicine and how they're helping us right now in this very tumultuous period we have at the end of an epoch and the end of an era, and also perhaps a time when humans are shifting to a very different kind of space. So yeah, I'm very grateful and very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thanks. Yeah. So lay it on us. How would you say that? And I'll tell you, the first thing that drew me when you were talking about it was your special relationship. Was it with mugwort? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, wow. People often ask me, how did I get into working with plants? And I often wonder, where should I start? I mean, there are some plants that have been with me since I was quite young. There have been some plants that have been with me since I was a teenager or a young man. And then there's plants like mugwort that have been with me for about the last decade. And I'm just wondering where to start with this particular journey. So, okay, maybe the easiest place to start is really how I got to be on the spiritual path, which was back in 2010. I read a book by a lady called Patricia Corey, which was about the Egyptian mysteries, the Anunnaki, and a whole bunch of stuff like that, and ended up taking myself and my ex-wife to Egypt back in 2010, which then started a really, really amazing journey. It's been incredibly challenging. And what is it now? 12 years on? It's still going on. And I remember chatting to one of my teachers, and I said, it surely gets easier on the path. And she's like, no, it seems to just keep getting harder. And I'm just like, that's not what I wanted to hear. So I thought maybe there's another way of doing this. And so anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So the journey in Egypt was super profound, had a very incredible 2 weeks, really, spending time with a big group of light workers, traveling around Egypt, had some very profound past life regression experiences actually on the cruise on the Nile with one of the other people on the group, and that opened up a whole bunch of stuff, really, particularly some off-planet stuff, which was a little bit, I mean, bearing in mind back in 2010 I was still just a chap who liked his beer and watched his football. So being told that I possibly had past lives off planet was something quite mind-blowing for me at the time. It all seems a lot more normal now, I have to be honest, but at the time it was something a little different. So anyway, that kind of then prompted, at the time I was living in the Middle East in Dubai, and we were about to shift to India. And actually the Egyptian trip was a sort of a transition between the very corporate world of Dubai into a much more kind of spiritual journey in India, which eventually took us up to Dharamsala. Spent a lot of time there, about 6 to 8 months, I think it was in the end, studying at the Dialectic Center, taking teachings from many lamas, including His Holiness, also transmissions from the Karmapa and a whole bunch of stuff. That then led to 2 years in a semi-monastic center in Tuscany. And during the second part of that, I got the really strong calling to go back to Britain. In fact, I was already going back to Britain, to do events there. We were running an event called Gateways of the Mind, which was about lucid dreaming. And it was on one of those trips back promoting that I got the very strong call to go and drink ayahuasca. And the rest, they say, really is history. During that very first session, she said to me, that event that you have in your mind, because I was already formulating the idea for the event called Plant Consciousness. And I was thinking kind of sustainable living and that kind of thing. And I was just like, no, we need you. The plants need you to take to the world the conscious intelligence of plants and share with everybody what I'm sharing with you now, which is that plants have intelligence and can talk to you. So I was just like, somewhere in a teepee, outside of Glastonbury at the time, thinking this is all fairly full on. I mean, I was used to mind altering substances and plants by that point, but I'd never experienced anything like ayahuasca before. And but it struck me, the message was really clear. And I was just like, wow, I'm having a conversation with a plant. So I wonder how many other plants I can have conversations with. And that really kickstarted everything. Rolling on from that, I then spent 2 years studying with Carol Guyot, herbalist and shamanic teacher in Ireland. That was really powerful for me, having a mother who comes from Belfast, from the north. I spent a lot of time in Ireland as a youngster during the Troubles, saw a lot of stuff that most kids probably wouldn't have seen actually in Britain at that time, but also have a deep soulful connection to the land as well. And so really a lot of the 2 years I spent with Carol was learning about the plants, but also I found was kind of a soul retrieval experience, and really connected me deep into the spiritual network of Ireland for a number of years. And we ended up running events there too for about 5 years, working with a local Irish shaman called Martin Duffy at Dundee Park. Anyone who knows anything about Ireland and shamanism will have come across Dundee at some point. And at the same time, I also started studying with Pam Montgomery, who was really my plant spirit healing teacher, who I studied with for 5 years. And that was really deep, really profound. And even after we'd finished doing the apprenticeship with her, we still carried on running events with her. She would come over every year. We would do a number of plant diet retreats. And it was really from her and from Carol, because Carol's written a great book called Sacred Plant Initiations, was really about how to do dietas or diets with plants. And that's very much based on the South American idea of dietas, which is where you go into the jungle, you drink ayahuasca normally to open the process. It can be 10 days, it can be 2 months, it can be 6 months, it can be a year. I mean, it depends how deep you want to go. And then they'll give you a special brew of another plant. And the idea is that you spend the time in isolation, and through working with the gateway plant of ayahuasca, it opens up the sort of more psychic realms. And then the brew that you're drinking from a different plant will come and visit you in your kind of alone time. And so you make the connection that way. Me being very scorpionic, I decided to adapt that system and not work with ayahuasca, but work with the local sacred fungi, which I found worked very well. And I then started to experiment with ceremonies and making flower essences. This is right back when I was first starting to make medicine, probably back in about 2012. And I realized that if I ran ceremonies and worked with the intention with the sacred fungi to open up the astral space, I could then invite into that space through the essences that I was making and other people's essences to begin with, the spirit of those plants, because it's quantum, that's the beauty of water. It can hold the quantum intelligence of almost anything, as the work of Emoto shows. And so that then really opened up, everything that's happened since. And mugwort was the first plant that actually came into my awareness. And she was, I've been with Santa Maria, the cannabis plant, since I was a teenager. And that really has been one of my main allies, actually. And it has really always given me a place internally to go to when things didn't make sense. And my life has not always been so straightforward. And especially as a youngster, I had a lot of troubles. So the inner space was a place where I started to feel at home, and it was a place where cannabis made everything seem okay. As I've got older and gone further on the journey, I've also realized that she is really the bridge plant to the 5D consciousness, the heart consciousness. Santa Maria is the goddess. She's unconditional love manifest. And, that's really the creative space. And so that's how I started to work with all of these plants, with the sacred fungi, with the Santa Maria, and then with the trees and plants of the hedgerow and field. And it just opened up a whole vista for me that, again, being so Scorpio, was just like, wow, how many plants are there in the world? How many new friends can I make? Boom. That was the beginning of a love affair that is still going on very much to this day. So yeah, that's maybe by way of a little introduction as to how I got into all of this.
Wow. So your experience, and that's going through in terms, like you said, plant medicine and taking things like ayahuasca and Santa Maria and things like that. But you've also experienced the consciousness of just everyday plants, like every single thing, like you were talking about. Which of those has been most prominent for you, and what is, like, how does this fit for us? Like, what is the point, and why did they come in this way?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and probably at the heart of everything I'd like to share this evening. So, some of these plants were already in my awareness and had been, but not so necessarily so consciously, particularly since teenage years. And that was part of the journey. And actually, what I really learned in the first year or two of drinking ayahuasca, which amazed me, was that all of the teachings came through not in an Amazonian shamanistic way, but they all came through in a very Tibetan Buddhist way, which really didn't make sense to me at all at the time, until I kind of asked Mother Ayahuasca about this. And she said, well, look, it's obvious, right? You've just spent 2-3 years studying all of this deep Tibetan Buddhist stuff. So I'm using the platform that you've created there. And then what I started to experience was all of the teachings that had gone in here at a very sort of head level suddenly started to come into my heart. My heart opened more. And then I started to understand the profundity of the teachings of aspects of Tibetan Buddhist, culture. And then that's when I really started to understand about ethics and morality and principles and all of those great things that Buddhism teaches, but sometimes get a little stuck here and people don't perhaps live. And that's where I found that ayahuasca really opened me to that understanding. And it was never in my intention to become an ayahuasquero. I did end up going to Ecuador some years later and spent 6 months training with an Amazonian shaman, a Quechua shaman, which maybe I'll come to in a bit. So that did end up being part of my journey, but I never saw myself in that particular regard, even though ayahuasca told me in the very first ceremony I did that I was a medicine person and that I would be doing the same work as other people in that space. And at the time, I was just like, really? I don't know, man, I don't see that. And then roll forward a decade, and sure enough, ayahuasca was absolutely correct. So, all of these experiences kind of open me up to the understanding that plants are not just these little green things that, kick around in the garden or the field or the forest, and that some people feel like we should spray Roundup on because they're bothering us. But actually, these are incredibly intelligent beings, particularly the strong medicine plants. And the more I've worked with them, the more I've come to understand, like you said at the beginning, that some of them are star beings, some of them are from different planetary systems. But most of all, what I've come to understand is that they're really what we would call in Buddhism bodhisattva beings. They are beings that have come back to help because they can. They don't want anything in return. They don't expect anything. They just come and they give freely and endlessly. And if any of the audience here listened to the talk I did with Zach recently, I think he very aptly pointed out just how resilient Dandelion is. That guy's had war waged on him with Roundup for I don't know how many decades. And he just keeps showing up for us, right? He just keeps showing up and giving his medicine. And every time we try to get rid of him, he comes back with even more. It's like, no, you're not getting this. You need to understand why I'm here. So, this is how I started to look at plants. And the more that I explored into the astral planes, the more I went into fifth dimensional consciousness, the more I stabilized my ability to hold myself in those spaces and not get overwhelmed by the medicine, by the ayahuasca or the fungi. I've worked with Iboga, San Pedro, peyote. I've worked with all of the major entheogens at some point, but the ones that I really like and I have stuck with is the sacred fungi, the San Pedro cactus or wachuma, and the Santa Maria. It's kind of my holy trinity. One opens my heart, one connects me into the web of life, and the other one takes me to 5D consciousness. And between those three plants, I can then introduce other plants and start to meet the intelligence of them reasonably quickly now. It's taken me a good number of years, and it seems kind of amusing to me now that when I think back 12 years ago, I thought I had the sensitivity of a piece of concrete and had no idea that I was empathic, only a vague idea that I was even psychic. And then through the process of working with the plants, I started to realize all of these things and suddenly started to make sense of the chaos that had really been the first sort of 35 years of my life. And suddenly started to realize that these plants could help not only show me the non-physical things in my field that had actually been making a mess of my life, but also start to show me the root causes of how those attachment beings, unhelpful energies got into my space and where to start looking to heal those things. And so, what I would often say is that people gravitate towards the very powerful entheogenic medicines like ayahuasca because they're looking for a big experience. But I have to say, some of my most powerful experiences have been with plants like wormwood and dandelion, and of course mugwort is probably one of my all-time favorites, although I kind of say that about all the plants just to keep everybody happy. But
so what would be one of those, when you say your most powerful experiences, can you tell us about one of those?
Wow, yeah, crikey, I don't know where to start.
Like one maybe with the dandelion or mugwort, or one of those, a plant that's not considered to be a psychedelic plant.
Sure. I think mugwort's probably the good place to start because, like all of the artemisias, they are sitting right on that borderline because they have a compound in it called tujone, which particularly in wormwood, if we go into the history and look at the presence of wormwood in the drink absinthe, which is, Artemisia absinthium, we can start to get an idea that these plants, the Artemisias, sit very much on the cusp. They're not entheogens, just make you very present. Wormwood in particular, I would say, is the plant that reveals the truth. She is a plant of truth in that she opens our third eye and allows us to see everything. That sounds great. Except that when you start to see how is the world around you, you realize the world around you is not so great. And you realize how many lies people are telling you and how many lies they're telling themselves. And what I like about the Artemisias is they're very, very direct and very blunt. I remember talking to wormwood once. I did a fungi ceremony to meet wormwood. And I was doing a parasite cleanse at the time with wormwood. I've done parasite cleanses for a number of years and have found them to be very interesting. I've done them with different aspects of wormwood. So I've done them with sweet wormwood, which is Artemisia annua. I've also done them with red stem, Artemisia scoparia. But generally, I do them with Artemisia absinthium. And I grow the plants myself. I make the medicine myself. And I had this very strange experience of being very much with the medicine, with the mushrooms, and then having this weird experience of being fumigated. And I was like, ugh, like what's going on here? And then wormwood comes in. It's like, what do you want from me, man? You wanted to do the ceremony. You wanted to find out how I work. So here you go. I'm killing all of those parasites in your field and you're getting to experience it firsthand. And I was like, whoa, like that's not quite what I was expecting. But it was a very interesting insight, and it showed me at the energetic level what wormwood is doing. And she said, look, you have to understand that I am cleansing you, but at the same time, I'm also killing and releasing these parasitic energies. And because you've gone into the energetic space, you're getting to see that much more clearly. So that was one of my more interesting experiences with wormwood. But I also have done other ceremonies with her and asked her, doing a ceremony with wormwood is a bit like going into a really murky kind of shadowy fog. And I asked her, so why would I do this again? And she said, you have to understand that there are beings here in the corners of the darkness and the fog who never see the light. And when a being like you comes in and brings the light into the space, you give them the opportunity to experience the light and release them from that space they're in. So she said, I can understand why you wouldn't want to come into this space very often because it's pretty yucky. But at the same time, she said, you are doing a lot of good. And so I've often tried to share that idea with Wormwood because she's a very, very powerful plant, but she has an amazingly good sense of humor. If you get to know, it's very, very direct. But I said, how come you make a joke out of everything, Lady Wormwood? She's like, well, look, man, look at the work that I do. I'm out here right at the edges of the light, in the darkness. And it's like, man, it's got to be fun. Otherwise, I'm just going to get really miserable with this work and not want to do it anymore. So I'm just like, I don't know, conversations with plants can be a bit like this sometimes. And so the artemisia is a really, really powerful plant, and as I talked about a lot with Zach and generally have talked about, I think they're one of the most important plant clans that we have available to work with right now, because they literally grow on every continent apart from maybe Antarctica, but there are something like 400 varieties of artemisia. And when I chatted to Zach, degrees of alkaloids and different chemicals, and there are the mugworts and the wormwoods and the sagebrushes, because there are sort of 3 different branches of the artemisia clan. But he says at the quantum level they can all do the same thing. So that's really interesting for me. And the way that I work is really in the quantum space. So I do administer medicines at the 3D level with tinctures and essences and all of those things. But what I started to realize through doing the dietas was that I could communicate with the plants at the 5D quantum level, and they would start to share information there, which I could then use with powerful intention to do remote clearings on people. So I started to do a lot of, to be honest, there was a period for about 8 years where I was always in diet with a plant continuously, one after another, because they just were queuing up to make friends. And I was just like, what am I going to do? I want to be friends with all of you guys too. And so cue 8-9 years of really, really intense healing, because every time you do a plant diet, it's doing healing work on you. But that's also how I got to learn about how the plants work, very much in the same way that I believe Edward Batch did when he was making his flower essences.
Wow.
He put a lot of the medicines through his body and almost killed himself and poisoned himself a couple of times by the experiences it would bring on. But he then realized that he wasn't sick with those things, but the plant was showing him what healing work it could do for people that might have conditions that he was experiencing. So
you did, when you were doing this, that's fascinating. So when you were doing this, when you say you went on a plant diet, so to experience the different consciousnesses, you weren't necessarily going like using the mushrooms to then access them at the 5D level. You were instead going on like a diet where you only ate that one thing, or you ate that one thing and then experienced it in your own body, and then through that access the consciousness?
Very good question, Anne. And actually the answer to that is a combination of all of those things.
Okay.
So traditionally, in the South American way of doing it, you would really only drink water, maybe some plantain and rice, and that would be it. And you would eat that to really empty the system out. And when we first started running plant diet retreats, we would do it for 4 days, and we would fast with the group, and we would make a brew that would contain let's just say it was hawthorn. I think that was the very first plant diet retreat that we ran with our teacher Pam. And so in the brew would be hawthorn tincture, distilled hawthorn water, there would be essence, there would be tea, and there would be many different varieties of the same medicine all put into one brew to make a very, very potent elixir, which we would then drink 9 rounds of over 4 days, and would be fasting. And so you not only do you empty the system out, which is great anyway for the body every once in a while, but then you would make space to invite the plant in. And so that's how I started, was doing it like that. But I also realized quite quickly that by working with the entheogenic Santa Maria and the fungi, that I could access the more sort of quantum intelligence space, and I could start to take teachings directly from the plants there. So I started developing my own system of protocols and diets, working with the essences that I was making. And so typically I would make an essence from a new plant that had come to me, and I would spend 3 weeks with that plant, taking the essence. I wouldn't necessarily fast or diet or anything. In the end, I found that I didn't need to. My connection with the plants got to be so strong and so quick, even with new ones, that I would be able to get a lot of the information reasonably quickly. However, I still, if I'm doing a 3-week process with a new plant, I just recently did rosemary for the first time, which was really interesting. Normally during the 3 weeks, I will make the essence to begin with, because that's really the quantum intelligence of the plant. And then I'll make tincture and I'll make tea, and I'll start putting the medicine through my body, see how does it react in my body. What does my body intelligence tell me? Then I'll combine that with maybe several fungi ceremonies or some journey work with Santa Maria, all with the very, very strict intention I want to connect to the spirit of this plant. When we work with any plant medicine, I've discovered, with very clear intentions, the plants always respond to those intentions, always, which I found to be super interesting. And it also made me realize why why so many Westerners, start maybe working with essences and they don't feel anything after 3 or 4 days. And so they ditch it and go back to the doctors and take the pharmaceuticals. But what I come to realize, if I give, let's say, rosemary a 3-week container that I'm going to take the essence in, I started to realize for the first couple of weeks, pretty much with all of the essence protocols I was doing, I didn't feel much, didn't get much in the way of downloads, didn't get much in the way of information, which I would think was strange. And I started like, okay, maybe I'm not getting this plant. And then what I started to observe was in the final week, particularly in the final 3 or 4 days, boom, everything would drop in. And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, now I can see how rosemary's been affected in my life for the last 3 weeks, or particularly with dandelion. He was the master at this. He really showed me precisely how this worked. And it was like, okay, so we start out here in the mental body, the first few days, the first week, then we move into the emotional body. Once we've worked through the emotional stuff that we can do, then we come into the more etheric mind space. And then we're coming towards the end of the protocol. So I was like, is that why I don't sense you for the first week or two? And I said, yeah, because we're doing work right to the outside of your field. And it's only when we get in close that we're finishing our work, because you gave us the 3-week instructions. You told us you got 3 weeks, Senor Dandelion, to do your work. And so he was working to that. And what I came to realize was that when we give the plants these containers, they really, really stick to them. And we have to stick to them too. And if we abandon the diet halfway through all the protocol, the work doesn't get finished, which unfortunately is, I think, what happens a lot when people go to take the big pharma products instead.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what is the role of rosemary?
Well, rosemary is still a new one for me, but what I've learned from rosemary is some stuff I already knew from working before, which is that she's often connected to memories. So you can bring up memories that need to be released. And what I found during my time with rosemary, which was back in March, it brought up a lot of grief and sorrow, actually. I went through a bit of a rough few weeks with rosemary, but I also realized that what I had to let go of was grief and sorrow for the world that has died and that is basically gone now. And all of my friends, family that I'd lost in the process over the last 2 years. I mean, it's been a very challenging 2.5 years for everybody. And I'm sure that we've all lost people or situations. I mean, my whole life has completely changed from a year ago. I'm living in a different country. I've left my tribe. I've left my work, left all of my businesses, left my marriage. Everything went at summer solstice last year. And, now I find myself living in Mexico. And, that's kind of, I guess, in many ways down to the plants. That was really dandelion. That was Angelica. I work a lot with Angelica Archangelica, which is very connected to Archangel Michael, who is really my boss in this work. He's the guy that I answer to when it comes down to it. And he's also the guy who guides me through my life. And so what I started to realize with plants was that A, that I could trust them, and B, if I listened to them in accordance with my higher self, that they would really, first of all, allow me to release and surrender a lot of stuff and to let go. And so I think, at the end of the process coming to rosemary, that there was all of this stuff from the last couple of years that hadn't really been processed out properly, and it needed to be brought up. So there was a fair amount of tears, and I felt good afterwards. So that would be a very good example of a first initial hit or interaction with a plant like rosemary, who I don't know so well. Great with roast potatoes and a Sunday dinner, but I don't know much beyond that. So this is how it starts, and I'll go back and I'll do another process maybe in 5 or 6 months if I feel like I need to process some grief, and now I'll go to rosemary to help release that. So this is how the process can start. And with a plant like mugwort, I've dieted with her, I don't know how many times, maybe 20 times, and every time I learn something new. So that's how it goes. It's a bit like a friendship with a human, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if, in terms of getting the benefit of the plant, if you're just putting rosemary on your potatoes, are you getting that benefit, or does it take the concentrated dose in a tincture or something like that?
Well, it's a good question. I think if we're in a place of openness to receive with plants, and this of course includes food plants, that they're also medicines. All of them are medicines, and we eat the fruits of many medicine plants, including potato. Potato is a great medicine plant, actually, and is really good for us. So I guess if we were to eat our Sunday roast with the intention that I really want to receive the medicinal, nourishing qualities of rosemary with potato and whatever else we're eating, then we will get that. And I think that that's been one of my major lessons that I've learned with the plants over the years, is that they really bring me into the place of being in the present moment. That's very much a dandelion teaching. There is only the present moment, and the present moment is perfect always. It's always divine. So then what I started to realize was that the present moment can expand. And rather than doing like a lot of Westerners would do, which is to always be looking into the future, projecting, when this happens, that'll happen. When I get this, this will happen. Da, 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 da. I started just to get rid of all of that and just like, well, actually, I'm really happy right now. So why bother thinking about what's going to happen next year? And with all of the chaos in our world, it's like, well, how can you even think about what's going to happen next week? I find it very difficult. But also through growing the plants and spending a lot of time in the garden, it really brought me to be present and to observe the plant in its natural environment and to give it the due respect that it deserves, to meet it in its own environment on its own terms with all of its friends around it. And, you know, to start engaging with nature in that way. So I think a lot of it is intention, and I'm sorry if the internet is a little unstable. I think maybe it's freezing a bit here and there.
We're still holding good, so
yeah.
don't worry.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So it's about intention, and I think that's probably one of the most important things to say, that intention is incredibly important in everything that we do. And once I started working strongly with plants in this way, in this realm, it started to make me very aware of how my dreams, my visions, my prayers were all starting to come true. And as I've said in previous videos, I think almost every single prayer that I put out now in this lifetime has come true, which is incredible for me, particularly in these times of chaos. But I made very strong prayers for New Earth, particularly on the conjunction back in January 2020 about New Earth. And I've been making the same prayer pretty much since I started to wake up in 2010. And I kind of thought it would be like this, and I thought it'd be something like that. Then I thought it was going to be that. And in the end, I had to let go, and I had to be completely taken out of the continent I lived on to a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. I was lucky enough to have a few connections here with some wonderful Mexican grandmothers who took me in, and I lived on a ranch for 4 months during the winter, and I processed out a lot of stuff in the space of 4 months, just in isolation, really. Also helped me to learn Spanish a little quicker. But I also met the local artemisia. It's called Estafillete in Spanish, or Istahuatl in the Nahuatl language. And so the very first plant I met was the cousin of mugwort.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm like, okay, I feel like things are going to be okay here because this is one of my friends. So I immediately went to work. The plant was literally growing at the gateway to the ranch, which was in a beautiful location in Hidalgo. And so then I immediately made an essence. I made a tincture, and I started working with the plant. She's very, very powerful in the dream space. And so I started to get a lot of intuitions and downloads from that space. And it really helped me start to process the life that I just left. You know, one of the major qualities of the artemisias is realignment. Many, many powerful qualities actually to the artemisias, but at an energetic level, they can actually realign us. And you know, I thought I was already pretty aligned, but it turns out I still had a few kinks that needed to be ironed out, and I needed to do those on my own. So we're better than living with, you know, a couple of grandmothers in the middle of nowhere in Mexico when I didn't even speak their language. So it was a very internal process, but I did the process with, first of all, Istihuatl, the artemisia, but then I also met maguey, which is the plant from which mezcal is made. And if anyone's ever been to Mexico, mezcal seems to get into everybody really quick. It's the most incredible medicine, it really is, because it's made from the heart of the cactus, of the maguey cactus, and so it's really a heart tincture, which I think is really interesting. So, you know, in the same way that I might make a hawthorn berry tincture, I really see that the mezcal is a maguey heart tincture. So I'm now wondering if I did a hawthorn maguey mezcal tincture, what that might be like, but I don't know. I think it'd be a lot of heart energy, that's for sure.
That's amazing. So one question for you, so in terms of relating to plants, so I was just thinking about like how, okay, relating to animals, like I'm vegan, I wouldn't eat an animal, but then I eat plants, and plants have consciousness. And what about like mowing my lawn? Like I'm mowing over dandelions. Do you know what I mean? Like how does that all fit?
Yeah, I mean, I also was vegetarian for 8 years, very sort of moralistic principles, and then I got sick actually and realized that I did need to eat meat, and so I completely revisited my relationship with those animals. And then it made me sit and think about that exact thing. I'm like, well, if I just pick this capsicum from my plant and I'm eating it, this is still alive. So I can't make the distinction that I'm not going to eat it because it's something that has been living. That doesn't make any sense. And so then what I started to really do with myself was break down in the dualistic sense of these ideas of this or that, black and white. And I realized that I needed to put into my body what my body needed. And my body was telling me that at that point that I needed to eat some red meat. And the moment I put that in, my body just went ping, yes, please, we need more of that. And so then I was just like, okay, it's not really what I want to do. But at the same time, if I use this juxtaposition of eating the plants, who are really my friends and they're alive and they're super conscious, way more intelligent than actually most animals, how do I square that one off? Mm-hmm. So in the end, I couldn't. And I'm just like, well, I think I just have to be true to myself and honor, in regards of the food, what my body wants. I don't use lawnmowers. I have to be honest. I hate trimmers. The plants especially hate the trimmers. When we lived in Wales, we lived underneath a very old yew tree, 1,000-year-old tree, next to a graveyard. And for some reason, the local villagers had the disease of the strimming, which would mean that at least one person would be out with a strimmer every single day in the summer. And it would drive me crazy, especially when I was trying to meditate or do healing work. And I'd be like to the guys, look, man, you just cut this lawn like yesterday and you're here again, cutting it again. And I started to realize it's actually some sort of mind disease that particularly British people have that means that we always have to be cutting the lawn. And I was like, what's with this? Is this part of the Roundup gang, that feels like we have to obliterate nature? So I don't know, but I kind of feel that in many ways it's a subconscious programming that many Westerners have, which is that we must keep nature under control. We must make the lawns nice. We must have our white fences painted. Everything has to be neat and tidy, and the grass can only be 1/2 inch tall. Otherwise, something is dreadfully wrong in the world. And goddamn those dandelions, they have to go, right? I think it's my biggest bugbear. And I remember the very first session I did with Zach privately, and he said, this really gets your goat, doesn't it, David? He said, when the humans mistreat the plants, I'm like, yep, it's the one thing that's guaranteed to wind me up. So, it's a personal choice. We do have to do gardening. We do have to do pruning. I do have to cut things in the garden. So I always do it as a conversation. Everything that happens in my garden is an ongoing conversation with all of the plants. It's like, look, everyone, we all have to share this space. We all need to have our own space. We need to grow the medicines. This is a joint effort. We can all just get along happily. But if one of you gets a little kind of boisterous or out of control, then we're going to have to do some cutting back and some pruning. And that's just how it's going to be. So invariably, the garden behaves itself and everybody finds their space. And what I found is that actually letting the plants grow freely like this actually makes them stronger. It makes the medicine in them stronger because they've had to strive to get anywhere. And I think that's another really good parallel with humans, is that it's only through adversity that we really start to grow and we start to evolve. And people often say that humans are like animals. I disagree. I think humans are like plants much more. So yeah, we make our choices, but I think that if we're in accordance in a place of intention and respect and co-creation with the plants, they understand that sometimes we need to cut things back because we need to manage things. But as long as we explain why we're doing it and it's done with love, then I think it's all okay.
That makes sense. So I was thinking earlier, you were talking about the 3 of the different and I'll call them psychedelics. I know you used another word of plants that help you access that 5D consciousness. And you mentioned that they have 3 different roles, one of which was, so can you go back and touch on what does which? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, this is just one of the ways that I work with them, because these are all incredibly profound medicines. And I did an interview this morning, like I said, with a Peruvian shaman who works with Huachuma, with the San Pedro cactus that really comes from the Andes. And we were talking in depth about that, a plant that we both know and love well. Very, very different to, let's say, psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca, which contain dimethyltryptamine or DMT. The cactuses contain mescaline, a completely different kind of alkaloid. And so the experience can be quite different. And what I started to realize earlier in my sort of plant journeys was the realms that I were going into were places that would typically be called the 4th dimension, the astral planes, or the other world, or maybe the lower world if I was on an unlucky trip in the jungle. But I started to map these places out, and then I started to look into the cultures that I was familiar with, particularly the Celtic and Norse traditions. And I started to understand that a lot of the myths and mythological stuff that had been written about in those medicine spaces, they weren't myth at all. They were actually very, very real. And I started to realize that that was the real reality. And this experience that we're in now is the real psychedelic experience. You know, with the illusion box and the internet. I mean, this is a whole portal that we're working with here. We're sat in an energetic portal through which almost anything can come. In this case, it's going to be something nice and cheerful about plants, but we also have to be aware that we're opening ourselves up into these portal spaces anyway. And so that's just a good lesson with our telephones, with our computers, because right now there's a lot of unhelpful energy information flying around that's not really particularly helpful for us. So when it comes to the plants, you know, I realized that with the sacred fungi, that it was really taking me into the emotional space. It was showing me where there were unhelpful attachments or beings or energies that were really putting a lot of rubbish in my head about a whole bunch of stuff. And once I realized that if I could, control myself energetically in those spaces, then I could start to navigate and explore those spaces much more profoundly, which is what I started to do. Unfortunately, I had a good 5 years worth of stuff that needed to be cleared out before that happened. You know, like most people, my first mushroom journeys were way back when I was a teenager. They weren't conscious. I didn't really understand psychedelics. And so I put them to one side until many years later when they did start to make sense. But once I returned to the mushroom in my early 30s, it was chaos. I was just like, we take these plants and anything can happen, you know, you're probably going to go crazy at some point, or who knows what, you know, you're going to hallucinate something running around your front room, whatever. And actually that's not what happened generally. I found that first of all, I never really got psychedelic visions. I just went to a place straight behind the visions, because actually the visions are really a bit of a distraction. And behind that is the astral space. And once I was into that space, I could start to experience, to begin with, actually some pretty unpleasant stuff. And then that gave me the impetus to become, okay, if I'm going to do this, if I want to continue in this process, which I did, I need to understand what is happening to me and why I'm basically going into all of these ceremonies afraid of what was going to happen to me. So then I started to realize I was carrying a lot of fear. So I had to start dealing with that. And then that's really what took me to the Amazon to learn from an ayahuasquero shaman. I also got initiated to be a tabaquero with tobacco and also with guayusa. So those are the three main plants of the Quichua people in Ecuador: is guayusa, tobacco, and ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is pretty brutal in the astral plane. She's the plant that teaches us how to die. So when we go into the astral planes, we're confronted by all of the stuff that we're going to be confronted with when we go to sleep, but more importantly, the stuff that we're going to be confronted with when we die in the bardo space. So the fourth dimension, the astral plane, the dream space, the medicine space, the death space is all the same space, actually. But there are varying spaces within that. So we have the lower astrals, where we tend to meet the unhelpful beings who feed on those traumas, those emotional traumas that we have. And then we can start to move a little bit more into the upper astrals, where maybe we might start to encounter some of the more light-filled beings. So that's really a little bit about, you know, the mushroom in the fourth dimension. I found that Santa Maria generally always connects me into my higher mind space and allows me to start looking at things from a non-dual perspective, which increasingly is really the only way to look at anything. Because if we get caught up in duality, we start to see left and right, black and white, dark and light, all of these things as these kind of, oh, I have to make a choice. And it's like, that's where we're getting manipulated into being polarized. And if we can take a step back out of our emotions and go, hold on a second, what's really going on here? What is this terrible situation that has happened to me? Why is it happening to me? And rather than getting caught up in the emotions of all of it, I can take a step back and say, hold on a second, there's got to be something positive going on here, because the light is always working through the dark. And that's when I started to see, wow, okay, this terrible thing that just happened, if that didn't happen, then none of that could have happened either. Right. And wow, that only happened because this happened. Then I'm just like, actually, you know what? It's all perfect. Everything is absolutely perfect. And then Dandelion's like, see, I told you. Right.
I thought it was so like interesting. I did do a trip to Peru and did San Pedro. And what amazed me is I did have an experience of seeing earth energy and seeing it and what fascinated me is that many years later, I was reading somebody else's description and their vision was identical to my vision. It was exactly the same thing that I saw, which I thought was really interesting. So, but I didn't think of to go behind that. This was years ago. I didn't think to go behind that and see what was beyond that vision. So that's an
San Pedro is really interesting for a number of reasons. And this is what I was talking about with Sergey this morning, is that For me, the San Pedro is a heart opener. And because of the nature of the cactus, we can really tell a lot about how the plant's energies are from how it grows and what its functions are. So we can understand from San Pedro that, first of all, it's very resilient. It can survive on almost nothing. So it brings that quality out in us, makes us very robust and sustainable. It also has these wonderful spikes on its outside. So it gives us natural protection. And I came to understand that a lot of the plants that really open our hearts, they have the spikes. Hawthorn is another one. Maguey is another one. And I was just like, well, why is it all of these heart medicines have these kind of like spiky exteriors? And then I realized it's just like, well, because we need to have the space to open our hearts safely, because I'm sure many people like myself have opened our hearts at various points and have been hurt. And so we shut our hearts down again. And so we live in a world where it's actually quite dangerous to open our hearts fully if we don't have that sense of protection in our space. And, with the San Pedro, what I really started to understand was exactly what you said, that this is a plant that allows me to see the middle world, this world, the world of nature spirits much more clearly. And it's not really an inner plant with lots of visions. It's a plant that you should take during the day. And if you do, you'll see the amazing cloud formations. You'll see all of these wonderful green beings in the trees and the plants. And so San Pedro for me is the plant that opens my heart, allows me to be happy and cheerful all the time, and really connects me into the garden space, into the nature space. So yeah, those are my 3 plants: heart space, 3D world; mushroom space, 4D astral emotional world; Santa Maria, 5D non-dual world.
Wow. So now I have worried about marijuana specifically, or you call it Santa Maria, right? That there has been so much manipulation in terms of making hybrids and creating new strains, that I have worried that the consciousness of the plant has been compromised in some way. What do you think about that?
Wow, it's a very good question, Anne. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's not just I call it Santa Maria for 2 reasons. It's Mother Mary. It's it's the Mother Goddess.
He talks about marijuana. He calls it Santa Maria.
So we have voice from beyond.
Here it is. We're good. Okay, continue. We're good.
Sorry. So yeah, I feel like it's important to try and change the vibration of how this plant is looked at, because it's been so stigmatized through being called the weed, the herb, dope, marijuana, all of which the plant is, I think, okay with. But I kind of feel that we're at a time when to really acknowledge the healing qualities that it has, and to call it, Santa Maria or Mother Mary is much more respectful to the really amazing qualities that this plant has. And yeah, it's not just the Santa Maria, it's also psilocybin is now being synthetically produced in laboratories. They did the same thing with Iboga, that these wonderful scientists who seem to know more than Mother Nature does, believes that they can extract elements of a plant and somehow make it better than the plant was originally, which to me is ludicrous. And I think it's just really typical of the arrogance of humans at this time. So I'm not in favor at all of this kind of activity. However, I do also understand that the plant has some say in all of this and is also directing some of this. But in the end, particularly with Santa Maria, there are I don't know how many hundreds of varieties, how many have been hybridized. I talked to all of them. I've smoked and imbibed many different varieties of Santa Maria, and I always have a communication with it. I always bless it beforehand. I talk to it beforehand. And sometimes the medicine is great and sometimes it's not so great, which is really why I would always try and produce my own medicine, no matter what plant it is, because that way there's no contamination, there's no fingers in between, there's no manipulation. There's just me and the plant that I've grown with my love in my garden. And as much as possible now, I try to do that with everything. So it's a difficult question, but I really urge everybody to try and adopt that approach if they can.
That makes sense. So I had just talking about the frequency and the vibration of plants and the role of plants. I was fascinated. I love the work of Bach, and we actually had a guy on once who covered that and talked about the whole life story of the guy who created those plant essences. And I didn't realize he took it into his own body like that and experimented and learned from that. I always wondered how he connected and how he learned what the role of every flower was. But I had a dream once where at the end of my dream, one of my guides came to me and he handed me a nectarine and he said, nectarines vibrate in the frequency of joy. Oh. And so I was thrilled. And then I was like, wait, come back. What about all the other fruits? And I've tried feeling the fruits and I'm getting nothing. Do you happen to know about fruits? Like, what are the different roles of fruits?
Well, sure. I mean, it's not my area of speciality, but I work with a friend who's a nutritionist, Rebecca O'Reilly. I've done a couple of podcasts with her, and we talk a lot about some of the detoxing plants, particularly wild blueberries. I also work a lot with elder, which for me is not typically a fruit, but the berries of elder, I think, are one of the most potent medicines that we can work with. And certainly in the old days in Britain, under Brehon law, if you chop down an elder tree, that was punishable by death. So that's how revered the elder tree is in our culture. In the Druid tradition of the OM alphabet, it's also the tree of death, which is also interesting because the tree after that is the yew tree, which is the tree of eternity. And in many of the graveyards in Wales, where the really, really old yew trees grow, I mean, the tree next to us was only 1,000 years old. A lot of the other ones in Mid Wales could be between 3,000 to 7,000 years. But often at the bottom of those trees would be growing elder. So I was just like, that's really interesting.
Wow.
Tree of death, tree of eternity. So you start to see these connections between plants. But what I really want to share is just that.
Oh, hold on. We lost you.
The
antimicrobial. Okay. We lost you for a minute. If you could repeat what you just said.
Sure. Just saying that really, the color of the blackberries from elder, it gives us a very strong indication, as it does with blueberries and bilberries, about the highly antimicrobial and antibacterial qualities of the plant. And I kind of understand that if you were to chop down an elder tree in, let's say, September, October time, when it's really thick with its medicine, you might just have deprived your whole community of the medicine that's going to keep them alive during the winter.
Wow.
So I can understand why that tree was protected. And for me, she is the tree of magic. I mean, there are many plants that have witchy qualities, particularly the artemisias. They're very, very witchy. But elder is the queen witch. She is the witch that all other witch plants bow down to, including the brugmansias, the daturas, the artemisias, all of those beautiful, beautiful plants. When the elder steps into the room, they're all like, yes, ma'am. So at the quantum level, I work with elder to find hidden magic. That's part of my job. I specialize in entity extraction, removal of hexes and curses and intrusions and all of that really fun stuff. But I can do that because I've had a lot of experience at it, but I also work with really, really strong plants who are super good at locating those things. And so, we can understand sometimes the quantum qualities of the plants and the physical qualities. They can tell us a lot about it. But fruits are amazing. They're life force, they're nourishment, they're detoxing. So it's like the world of fruits is a whole nother aspect of plant medicine, so we kind of get called to the bits that somehow resonate with us. So maybe that's your path with the plants, Anne,
I don't know, but I'm eating a lot of nectarines. I'll tell you that much.
Are you feeling joyful? Are you in the happy space?
I'm so joyful.
It must be working, so.
Well, I want to ask you, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, can you tell us about how people can connect with you? I know you've got some things coming up. Can you share information about that with us?
Yeah, thank you. So I just recently started a YouTube channel a couple of months back, and been super fortunate and blessed to be working with Pam Gregory, the astrologer, a fair amount, which isn't exactly how I got connected to Zach, but it's all part of the same group of people in Britain, and it's a long story. But so I got to do the channeled session with Zach and with Janet Trelawa recently, which was really interesting. If any of you haven't seen that, I highly recommend watching it, because it's a transmission from the quantum space. And myself and Zach are really telling everybody these are the plants that can get you from where you are now to where you probably want to be. So we focus on dandelion, the artemisias, horsetail, and the heart medicines, particularly hawthorn and San Pedro. Many of the plants I've talked about today, because they're so important. So I'm actually running from the 25th of July, which is the Mayan day at a time, the beginning of a 3-week global dandelion immersion, where I'll be releasing a certain amount of content about how to make dandelion essences, how to work with the medicines, bringing in other people to talk about how the dandelion medicine can work with us. And so really it's an immersive experience for those 3 weeks for people to go completely with, or to dip in and out of, or to come to at a later date. And, Dandelion is really, really powerful. He's a master geneticist. He's a master of time. I believe that he's probably from the Sirius star system because of his big connection to the cats, Diante de Leon, the lion's tooth, very, very solar plant, very connected to the solar being. So quite connected also to the angelic realms and the solar beings. So this is a very powerful plant. But the thing that I really want to share with dandelion is the importance of being present and really doing the detoxing work. Dandelion is a great liver detoxer. So for me, this is, as Zach said, it's one of the most friendly plants. Dandelion, or El Dandelero, as I like to call him, is a very, very cheerful, happy guy who just wants to show us the amazing synchronicities going on around us all the time. And if we can really let him into our life and let go and trust, the magic really goes full power. And particularly since the beginning of this year, with all of the incredible astrology and energies and light coming to the planet, dandelion, I believe, it is the plant that can really show us how to find the place of magic within ourselves, and then start to realize we can work with the artemisias, which are anti-parasitic. We're dealing with a lot of very heavy parasitic energies in our world. And then we've got horsetail. Now, horsetail is the most incredible plant. It's off planet, it's extraterrestrial, it's hybrid, it's prehistoric, and it's mostly made up of silica. And so we're now investigating, why do we need silica in our lives? And we're realizing that we're moving to a more silicon-based physical body because we need to be able to receive more light. And as we're able to receive more light, it means that we can start to journey out of this physical body with our consciousness more easily without burning our adrenals out, which, if you drink a lot of plant medicine, there's always the danger that you start to burn your adrenals and you can get fatigued and then start to get tired. So I'm just sharing some of these. This can all be found on my new website. Please forgive, I'm not a website builder and it still needs a bit of work, but quantumplanthealing.com is my website. You can get some more information there about the global dandelion immersion. I do need to update the details. The internet has not been kind to me this week, and every time I try to upload stuff, it crashes. So I'm just trusting that dandelion says it's all divine timing. So you can find out stuff there. You can also go to wisdomhub.tv, where a lot of my podcasts and previous interviews and so on and so forth. And there's lots of really great workshops with some of my own teachers, including Pam, and, you know, my geomancy teacher, Dr. Patrick Emanuel, is there, and he's the guy that taught me how to work with earth energies. And there's a lot of material there, but you can also email me. I'm pretty good on responding to people. I like to hear from everybody.
Fantastic. So would you want to share your email?
Yeah, so you can email me at Davyd, D-A-V-Y-D, at quantumplanthealing.com.
Fantastic. And your second website, you blipped a little bit when you said it. Could you repeat that second website again?
Wisdomhub.tv.
Wisdomhub.tv.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, perfect.
That's really an online TV platform that has lots of different workshops, talks, interviews. There's footage from all of the plant consciousness events. Yeah. There's a free subscription, or there's a monthly subscription to access some of the content too. But that's also a great place to learn about lots of plant related stuff.
Beautiful. David, this was as awesome as I thought it was going to be, even more so. So thank you so much. And I'm so thankful to all of you who were sending blessings to our internet connection and helping David stay with us the entire time, because he is definitely, we got several like unstable, and for sending you light. It worked. You're here. So thank you so much. It was really phenomenal, really eye-opening. I know I was loving it. I think everybody else was too. So, so thank you. We'll definitely be following your work. So please keep us in the loop.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, or are we out of time?
I don't see anything. Yes, please go ahead if you can say it verbally, because I don't see anything in the chat box.
Oh, I raised my hand, but it's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead. Hi, Nanan. Hi,
my name is Sishu. Oh, you can call me Nanan. That's fine. So I have two questions. First of all, Anne, what is nectarine?
A nectarine is like, it's in the grocery store. It looks like a peach, but it doesn't have any fuzz on it.
So it's like a flat peach?
It's like a peach. Yes, it's the same shape and color as a peach, but it's not fuzzy. It's like a smooth skin. So you'll see it in the grocery.
Type it, like I can look it up.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. And also, I'm sorry, what is his name? I've been driving and listening, so I think.
Yes, it's Davyd, D-A-V-Y-D, and the last name is Farrel, F as in Frank, A-R-R-E-L-L, Davyd Farrel.
Okay, so David, I have a question for you.
Sure,
yes, go right ahead.
So when I meditate with plants, sometimes I meditate with like a plant in front of me, like my orchid or whatever. And then after a while, I would just kind of loosen concentration on it, like, soft gaze at it. And then I'll see white light coming out of it. So is that like a form of consciousness? Like, am I communicating somehow? Like, what is that?
So if I understood correctly, because the line was a little faint, are you saying that you meditate with a certain plant, and sometimes after you finish meditating, you're able to perceive this light coming from the plant?
Yeah, not finishing meditation. In the middle of meditation, at some point, I will start to see, like, from the leaves on the edges, there's like bright white light.
So probably you're forming a connection with the plant in the meditation space, and what you're perceiving is the energy of the plant, in the same way that if you're able to perceive a human aura, you're starting to perceive some kind of aspect of the plant's aura. They also have energy fields, and if you've ever been in the vicinity of an oak tree, you can see exactly how big is its aura. So I feel like you're probably being able to perceive some energetic qualities of the plant, which is really cool.
Awesome. Then what do I do with it?
Love it.
Yes.
Make friends with it. Whatever you want, it depends what the plant is, of course. If it's a medicine plant, maybe you want to make an essence. If it's a plant with a beautiful flower, maybe it's just to make your home a more beautiful place. That's the interaction that you can strike up yourself with the plant.
I just remember the
how
first
do you want to
time
be
I
friends?
see it. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry to cut you off. I just remember the first time I seen it, like, I cried. I was just like, oh my God, I'm seeing God. Like, I literally feel like I was seeing God.
Yeah. That's very cool. That's very cool, Sishu. So hopefully you can continue to explore that. This sounds like a very interesting connection.
And also I have a question in terms of, like, you have to eat the plant to get the essence, or you can communicate without eating?
Oh, for sure, you don't need to eat the plant. In fact, there are many plants you wouldn't want to eat. I work with a lot of poisonous plants, actually. And, for example, a good one is henbane, which is part of the Weleda family of plants. And they work with it at a homeopathic level, because if you take any more than that, it will probably kill you. I had a very interesting experience once with henbane when I was picking out seedlings, because I used to grow it a lot. And at the time, my ex was just like, do you not think you should be wearing gloves? And I'm like, why? And just, well, because it's a poisonous plant. And I was just like, nah, I'll be fine. I've done this plenty of times. And about half an hour later, I started to feel very strange. And then realized that the poison from the plant had topically got into my skin and was starting to have an effect on me. At which point I momentarily panicked and thought, do I need to go to hospital for a stomach pump? And then I was just like, don't be stupid, man. You've got tobacco in the cupboard. If the worst comes to the worst, you can just go and take a large tobacco tea and purge it all out. Then I got the henbane spirit going, why would you want to do that? I'm trying to teach you something here. I'm not going to kill you. So then I was just like, okay, then we're fine. We'll just kick back. And so then I got to be able to perceive at a very strong but very minute energetic level the qualities of henbane, which were actually about body regulation of the systems in the body. I wouldn't want to go through the experience again, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. But in that case, it's much better to make an essence of that plant and then communicate with it through the essence. It's a lot safer and probably not going to end up in hospital either.
Perfect. Thank you. A question coming in from Paula. Paula, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My big boom spiritual awakening started last year, 2021. And I had a very few powerful quantum healings in Cancun, in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And my psychic abilities just exploded. I am fully connected to a point I cannot tell you how many mystical experiences, like without any induction of anything. Like, I've been having out-of-body experiences. It's like I have just pierced the veil, if you want. Mm-hmm. And the more I'm doing this and meditating for long hours every day and advancing my spiritual awakening, I feel that the more sensitive I become to cannabis. And in particular, I tried with a few shrooms once. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a lot. It was, well, they were the blue minis, I think they call them, if you know the strain. It wasn't too much. It was very, very, honestly, it wasn't a lot, but it kicked in a way I cannot describe. I don't know how many dimensions I was touching and seeing and hearing at the same time. I was almost going crazy. to the point I really, really had to make a big effort not to call 911 because I was becoming, it was becoming too much to bear and to handle. So all this to tell you that a small, tiny, insignificant gummy right now at this point of my psychic abilities and third eye open, it's like a lot already. Do you think that it is because of the spiritual awakening, or is there some sort of like toleration thing related to maybe DNA activation, or I don't know?
Well, probably all of those, to be fair. I mean, I can answer that from a number of different perspectives. So first of all, like, we're living at a time when there's a lot of light coming onto the planet. Everything is amped, super amped, both the positive energies and unfortunately also the negative energies, of which we've got a lot to deal with. There's a huge cleanup job that has to happen on the planet. Unfortunately, a large number of the human race have allowed themselves to be taken down a certain path, which is going to have to be rectified, and that's going to happen very, very soon, because it has to. So at the same time as that kind of pathway is going that direction, some of us are going the other direction and saying, well, actually I want to be still fractal. That's how I see the distinction between the fractal timeline and the cloning timeline. Let's call them that. The two different timelines here, and the fractal one is very much in connection to Mother Earth and is organic and is planetary, with Mother Earth. So I also work with fungi. Then I will normally, at some point, once the fungi medicine kind of starts to go to a space, then I'll work a little bit with Santa Maria, because it takes the fungi into a slightly different space, which is often when I get a lot more of the karma download. Sometimes in the depths of a fungi experience, it can be very, very full on. And actually, most of the time, I'm just trying to hold my space. But if I'm doing a healing ceremony for somebody, then my attention is on that. It's after that I'll perhaps be a little bit with Santa Maria. I normally put on the music. I also used to be a DJ for most of my life. And so I work a lot with trance music, which probably is not most people's way of doing things. But because of the syncopated repetitive 4 to the floor beat, which is the shaman's drum, I'm able to journey very easily with that music. So I normally put on my headphones and then meditate for an hour. And what I find is I stop listening to the music and my consciousness just goes up and out, which is really pleasant. But because of that continual, I mean, I have to put a lot of medicine through my body. That's how I've learned over the years, a bit like Edward Batch did with the essences. I've done the same thing. And it's only through doing that through my body, I get the frequency of something, either a positive vibration like the plant spirit, or of a negative or unhelpful vibration. And so it's because I've had so many unhelpful vibrations go through my body, I know what they are. So when I'm doing healings on people, I know when I'm encountering certain frequencies for certain traumas or certain types of things, because I'll feel them somehow in my energy field according to my previous experience. So all of this is by way of saying that there is no one answer to that question, other than that I think that it's probably a combination of your sensitivity, your meditations. I'm also taking a lot less medicine than I ever used to, particularly with the fungi. I would, do a ceremony 5 or 6 grams of golden teachers or something, and now I'm only taking 1 gram, and I'm just, it's too much sometimes, even for me. I'm just like, I don't want to be that full power. The medicine is not actually that helpful. So I've started doing a lot more mini dosing, which is to take, not a micro dose, but a mini dose, particularly with San Pedro. I mini dose with that every day, because I like being in that energy and being happy and cheerful and, being protected. And right now it's not a wisdom soup out there. It's just a bit of a soup. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a toxic soup as well. So these plants that I'm talking about, the artemisias in particular, I recommend everybody to get some kind of artemisia tincture with the intention to take it and to keep the parasitic energies out, because we are unfortunately now suffering an epidemic of toxic energies that we have to deal with. And so rather than do what a lot of people have done, which is close their eyes and pretend none of this is happening, I think it's much better to look at the problem in the eye and go, okay, now I know what you are. Let's find a solution, which is when the plants start to step in. So horsetail is also a big component of that. And so these are all plants that can help keep us in those nice frequencies so that we don't get the mind-bending distortions that come from all manner of directions at the moment. And we can keep as I've talked about with Pam, we keep our own truth and we hold our own narrative. And so I think that this is what the plants are doing for you.
Thank you so much, Paula. That's great. So can you repeat for us?
David.
Yeah, thank you. Can you repeat for us, what are the artemisias, the name of those plants you said that are the ones that are good for parasitic removal? What types of plants are those?
So the artemisias typically would be wormwood, Artemisia absinthium. I mean, there's like 350, 400 species of Artemisia. Okay. But there's the mugwort. So maybe on the west coast of America, you might have Artemisia suxdorfi, which is coastal mugwort. Then there's all manner of wormers, but you've also got the sage brushes, which is not to be confused with white sage or the sage family, which are salvias. Also great medicine plants, of course. So yeah, the artemisias are purification plants as well as many other things.
Got it. Thank you. We've got 2 more questions here in the chat. Ingrid is asking, can you help the plants that you cultivate with their own health, like nutrition and plant diseases? So the plants that you cultivate, can you help them?
For sure. I water them and I give them love every day. That helps go a long way.
Yeah.
I have also administered on occasion, I have administered certain essences from one plant to another. And that's also worked. You know, put a little drop of a certain essence in the watering can and then water a plant and help revive it. I think that most importantly, if we're growing plants, is that we have to take care of them. You know, if you had a baby, for example, would you leave it for 5 days without watering it? No. Well, why would you do the same with your plants? You know, we kind of have to give them the same amount of care that we would give a family member, because in the end, these plants might actually keep us alive. So I kind of think it's important to really give a lot of love. Plants respond to love. And if we talk to them from our hearts, if we try to connect with plants here, we're not going to get very far. Plants are all about the heart. They're 5D consciousness. And this nuggin up here is not 5D, unfortunately. Right. It thinks it is, but it's not. This piece of technology here is the 5D tech.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Ingrid says nice, and she talks to her plants all day. So, which is perfect. So brilliant. Judy has a question. She says, what about the use of plants in alcoholic drinks like juniper in gin? Is that a respectful way to use plants?
I think this is possibly the $1 million question for many of us, is can we still get away with having a little drinky poos and it still be medicine? Well, you know, I shared my story about mezcal, so I'm holding up my hands and saying, you know, I like a little tipple once in a while. I think that we can make alcoholic medicine drinks very, very nicely. I used to make a wonderful Hawthorn heart brandy, which kind of really brings out the slightly appley quality of the hawthorn berries. And if you put it in a nice 40% brandy, then you have a nice sort of hawthorn brandy. Which is kind of what I'm thinking with the Hawthorn mezcal, but that's a little plan in operation. But sure, it's always about intention, and I think that, you know, that alcohol is often made from a plant, right? You know, so I struggle to think of any alcoholic drinks actually that aren't made from a plant originally. So again, I think it's about intention. How do we make it? Is it made with love and respect? Is it made for mass profit, etc.? Are we adding chemicals? All of these things. So I think it's okay to make alcoholic drinks. And you know what? Some of the plants like to dance and have fun. You know, a little story from one of my mushroom ceremonies many years ago. I used to be super serious, sit and meditate and have all of these very long, you know, furrowed brows and be like really, you know, and one day the mushroom was just like, dude, man, you're so serious. Like, why don't you put on some music and get up and just move and shake this one out for a little bit? And I'm just like, really? We can do that? Just like, hell yeah, man, we like to have fun. Put on some tunes and let's get down for an hour and then we'll think about meditating. So, you know, 5D is all about fun and love and heart consciousness. And so I think it's okay to have a little bit of, are we doing it to bury something? Are we trying to suppress something? Or are we just, you know, having a little bit of fun and relaxing? You know, I think that it's all about the intention, as always.
That's fantastic. And then I had one last question, which is there some sort of dictionary, or are you writing a dictionary where people could reference and look up different plants and the things that you've learned about them?
That sounds like a great idea for a book.
Yeah.
I haven't done that yet. I mean, I'm how to say, I'm very Celtic. I'm also a bard, so everything is kind of stored. You know, in the tradition of bards, we have to store 1,000 stories in our head and be able to recount them at a moment's notice. So I kind of do that with plants and the information. So I'm not very good at writing things down. I'm very, very right-brained and just like to be very much like this in the moment and just see what comes through. But now that you've got me thinking, I'm like, okay, maybe. But there are lots of great books out there. There are lots of great herbal books. I often buy a lot of the old kind of witchy folk books, because actually contained within those books are things that people don't believe. But if you take plant medicine and then you test those theories, you find out that actually a lot of it's true. So that's also a fun activity that some of you might like to engage with at some point.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time with everyone's questions and being so thoughtful with all of us. Appreciate you very much. And I think we've got here. And Shisha says you should join the Wisdom Soup app and give talks about the plant. Exactly. You should definitely
No,
be.
not the Wisdom Soup app. There's another app called Wisdom where you can have a conversation and then someone can join the conversation while you are having it.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, sort of like a okay.
Like Clubhouse.
Yeah, like Clubhouse. It sounds
It's
like
better than Clubhouse because you don't need a room. You just need to talk and then you get listeners. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, everyone. David, really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your heart. And thank you guys. We will be back again next month. If you guys remember, we're always the second Thursday of the month, and we vary the time sometimes to accommodate our speakers, but we're always the second Thursday of the month. So I will see you guys again for Wisdom Soup in August. Thanks so much and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have fun and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.